The castle loomed over the valley like a sentinel carved from stone, its towers reaching toward the silver moon. Mist curled around the battlements, and the wind carried the faint scent of ancient flowers and colder things whispered about in shadowed corners. Tonight the castle seemed alive, watching, waiting as if it knew who had come. A carriage rattled along the cobbled path leading to the grand gates. Inside, the Omega sat quietly, hands folded in her lap, heart pounding like a drum. She had been summoned without warning, her fate hanging on threads she could not yet see. She was told only one thing: she must survive the night in the Alpha King's bed. The words had burned in her mind ever since. The Alpha King, the ruler of the northern lands. A man whose name inspired fear, respect, and curiosity in equal measure. Rumors painted him as cruel, merciless, and unyielding, but also a man bound by destiny, haunted by curses older than the walls themselves. And now she was to meet him alone within the confines of his chambers. The carriage stopped. Heavy doors creaked open and torchlight spilled onto the stone steps. She stepped out, her boots clicking lightly, but each sound echoed in the still night. Servants bowed and whispered as they guided her through the castle halls, the air heavy with the scent of burning wood and wax. Tapestries of past kings and battles lined the walls, their woven threads telling stories of honor, betrayal, and power. Finally, they reached a pair of massive doors carved with intricate symbols. The head servant paused. "This is where your trial begins," he said quietly. "No harm will come to you if you do what is required." The doors opened with a groan. She stepped inside. The room was vast, draped in deep crimson and gold. Candlelight flickered, casting long shadows on the stone walls. A fire crackled in the hearth, its warmth contrasting sharply with the chill that ran through her veins. And there he was, the Alpha King. He stood tall and commanding, cloaked in dark fabric that seemed to absorb the light around him. His hair was like midnight, his eyes the color of storm clouds, sharp and piercing. He did not move immediately. He simply observed, and the weight of his gaze settled on her as though measuring every thought, every intention. "You are," he began, voice low and even, "the Omega who has been chosen." She swallowed, unsure if her voice would serve her. I am." He took a step closer. The air between them was charged, a subtle current of magic and tension. She could feel it prickling at her skin, stirring something deep within. "Tonight is your trial," he said. "You must remain here until dawn. Do you understand?" "Yes," she whispered, though her heart thundered in her chest. "Good," he said, and for the first time, she noticed a flicker of something behind his eyes, something almost human, almost fragile beneath the armor of power. "Survive the night, Omega. That is all that is required." The king gestured to a carved bed draped with heavy velvet curtains. It looked impossibly large, regal, and forbidding at the same time. "You will sleep there," he said. "Nothing in this room will harm you if you respect the rules, but test them, and the consequences will be yours." She nodded, stepping toward the bed, careful not to meet his eyes. Yet the moment she crossed the threshold, she felt it. A pulse, almost like a heartbeat, that resonated with her own. The room seemed to shift, shadows bending slightly, and she stumbled slightly, catching herself on the edge of the canopy. The Alpha King did not approach, but his presence filled the room, heavy and unavoidable. He moved to the fireplace, adjusting a burning log, and the light from the flames danced across his face. She dared a glance. His jaw was tense, his eyes still fixed on her. It was not anger. It was something else. Curiosity, perhaps, or assessment, or a quiet challenge. "Sit," he said simply. She obeyed, perching at the edge of the bed. Her hands trembled slightly, though she refused to let him see it. He circled the bed slowly, as if inspecting not just her, but the air itself. "You feel it, don't you?" he asked. She shook her head, though she did feel it. The room alive with power, the magic in the stones, the air thick with the unspoken weight of fate. "The bond," he murmured. "It exists, though neither of us may fully understand it yet. You are my Omega, and I am your Alpha." The words hung in the air like mist, heavy and impossible. She tried to speak, but no words came. Her heartbeat echoed in her ears, a rapid drum against the quiet night. He stopped before her, and for a moment, the distance between them was almost unbearable. Then he leaned slightly closer, eyes narrowing, not in anger but in focus, as if he were trying to see her very soul. "You will not leave until dawn," he said again. and you will survive. That is the rule. But know this, the night is not only a test of courage, it is a test of trust. And trust is far more dangerous than fear. She nodded, finally finding her voice. I will try. He gave a faint, almost imperceptible nod. Then without another word, he stepped back toward the fireplace, his cloak brushing the floor, and the room seemed to exhale, settling into a tense quiet. Time stretched. Minutes became hours. Shadows shifted unnaturally, and she felt the slightest brush of movement at the edges of her vision. Sometimes she thought she saw shapes that belonged neither to her imagination nor the room. Magical wards hummed faintly in the air, invisible yet present, keeping her both safe and on edge. She tried to calm herself, focusing on the fire, on the simple act of breathing. But the castle had a way of making one feel very small and very exposed, even in the presence of a king. Suddenly, a soft whisper brushed against her ear. Not words exactly, but a sense of warning. A warning that the night would not be as simple as she had been told. She shivered, hugging her knees to her chest. The Alpha King spoke then, his voice cutting through the haze like a blade. Do not fear the shadows. Fear the choice you will make in the dark. She looked at him, startled. Choice? He did not answer immediately. Instead, he moved closer again, and this time she could feel the pull of something deep and ancient between them. It was magnetic, like the night itself was drawing them together. He extended a hand, not touching her, but close enough to stir the air. The bond chooses, he said softly. And tonight it will make its first move. Her breath caught. She could feel a warmth spreading from where his presence lingered. A subtle thrum of power and recognition. She did not understand it fully, yet she felt it with every fiber of her being. The room shifted again, the shadows lengthening and twisting as if in response to their connection. She realized then that the night was alive, a creature of its own making, and she was trapped within its gaze. Hours passed, or perhaps moments. She could not tell. Time had lost its usual meaning. Then, just as the first hint of dawn touched the high windows, a sudden surge of energy coursed through the room. The magical wards flared with silver light, and a whisper, soft yet urgent, brushed her consciousness. Fail, and you will never leave. She froze, staring at the source of the warning, heart pounding. The Alpha King's eyes locked onto hers, and she understood this was no ordinary night. This was the beginning of a trial that would test every part of her: courage, wit, heart, and spirit. And the first connection had already been made. A spark of recognition passed between them, subtle yet undeniable, and for the first time, she felt the weight of destiny pressing upon her. She did not know if she would survive the night, but she knew, with every breath, that the night had already survived her. And the Alpha King was watching, waiting, his stormy gaze softening for a heartbeat before hardening again. The trial had begun. The first light of dawn filtered through the high windows of the Alpha King's chambers, brushing the stone floor with soft gold. The fire had burned low, leaving only faint embers, and the room seemed to hold its breath after the events of the night. The Omega sat on the edge of the bed, her mind racing with the strange spark of connection she had felt with the king, the unspoken power that seemed to hum between them. She had survived the night, but the trial had only begun. The castle itself seemed to be alive now, shifting subtly with the magic that lingered in the walls. Shadows danced differently, moving like whispers in the corners of her vision. Every sound, footsteps echoing on the stone, the flutter of distant curtains, the soft crackle of the hearth, felt amplified, a constant reminder that she was under scrutiny. The Alpha King had not spoken much since the wards flared. He had returned to his usual distance, his figure towering in the room as he stood by the fireplace. Yet even in his silence, she felt the weight of his attention. He observed her as a sculptor studies marble, careful to notice every detail, every reaction. "You are awake," he said finally, his voice calm but carrying an edge that made her spine straighten. I am," she replied, steadying her voice. Her hands fidgeted in her lap, betraying her nerves. He circled the room, slow and deliberate, each step echoing in the chamber. "Do you understand what happened last night?" he asked. "The wards, the shadows, the spark?" She hesitated. "I felt something between us, but I don't understand it." "That is because it is not meant to be understood yet," he said, his gaze fixed on her. "The bond chooses the moment, And it chooses slowly, testing patience, strength, and heart. Last night it recognized you. It tested you, and you survived. That is the first victory. Her chest swelled with a mix of relief and fear. Victory was a strange word to apply to surviving one night under the gaze of a man whose presence seemed to bend the room itself. Yet it was the first step towards something she could not name but felt deep in her bones. Connection, destiny, a pull towards something far greater than herself. He moved closer and lowered his voice. But the bond is not alone. You carry power, Omega. Power that is older than this castle, older than the lineage of kings. Do you feel it? She shivered. I think so. Sometimes it feels like warmth, like something inside me is trying to wake. Good, he said softly, and for a moment the sternness in his face softened into something almost human. You must learn to trust it, to control it, to survive what is coming. Before she could reply, a distant sound reached the room, faint but deliberate. A soft clatter like stones being shifted in a far hallway. Both of them turned instinctively, their eyes narrowing. The castle was silent, yet the sound was unmistakable, unnatural. Go, he commanded, and the Omega hesitated. Where? She asked, voice small. See what follows, he said. Do not fear. Trust yourself. Trust the bond. She stepped out of the room, her boots barely making a sound on the polished stone floors. The corridor stretched endlessly, lined with portraits of kings and queens whose eyes seemed to follow her movements. As she walked, she felt a tingle of magic beneath her feet, a subtle hum of life in the stones themselves. The castle was alive and aware. She reached a narrow stairway that led down to the lower halls, the area where the servants rarely ventured. The clatter came again, louder this time, echoing through the darkened corridors. She followed cautiously, feeling a pull, an instinct guiding her steps. Finally, she reached a shadowed archway leading to an abandoned wing of the castle. The walls here were old, the tapestries faded and torn. Moonlight spilled through high windows, illuminating motes of dust floating like tiny stars. And there, in the center of the hall, was a shape, a creature made of shadow, black and shifting, almost alive in its movements. It froze when it noticed her, eyes like faint silver sparks. Her breath caught, but she remembered the king's words. Trust yourself. Trust the bond. Steeling her courage, she focused on the warmth she felt within her chest, the latent power the king had spoken of. Slowly, a soft glow began to emanate from her hands, pale at first, then brighter, filling the hall with a golden light that pushed against the darkness. The shadow hissed, curling away from the glow, and she realized with a shock that her presence alone could repel it. Her magic, untrained and raw, had power. It responded to her fear and courage alike. The creature lunged suddenly, and she instinctively raised her hands. A surge of energy burst forth, scattering it against the walls. The shadow shrieked and vanished into nothingness. She sank to her knees, trembling, realizing both the danger she had faced and the strength she now possessed. The Alpha King appeared behind her in silence, his dark cloak brushing the floor. Impressive, he said quietly. Few survived their first encounter with the shadows. Few are still without harm. I didn't mean to, she stammered. You cannot control what you do not yet understand, he said. But you are learning. That is what matters. She looked up, noticing a faint softness in his expression, something almost tender. Why are you helping me? She asked. He regarded her for a long moment. Because I cannot afford to lose you, Omega. And because you are not like others. You carry something the kingdom needs and something I cannot ignore. She felt a strange warmth at his words, a mixture of fear, relief, and curiosity. This man, feared by all, seemed both distant and near, dangerous and yet protective. The contradictions drew her in, as if the night itself had woven their fates together in invisible threads. Come, he said finally. There is more you must see. More you must understand. The castle holds secrets older than any of us, and your power, your bond, is tied to them. They walked together through the hallways, the Alpha King leading, his steps sure and deliberate. He spoke rarely, but when he did, it was to explain fragments of the past, tales of old battles, curses laid upon his bloodline, and the trials that had forged him into the man he was. You see, he said as they reached a library lined with ancient tomes, every generation has faced a choice. Power is not given freely. It must be earned. And often, it comes with a price. The Omega ran her fingers along the spines of the books, feeling the hum of magic woven into the pages. "And what is the price for me?" she asked softly. He turned to her, his stormy eyes reflecting the candlelight. "Survival, understanding, and the courage to face what lies within yourself. You are not only surviving me, you are surviving yourself. That is the trial, Omega. That is the test." She felt a shiver run down her spine. The trial was no longer a simple night in a chamber. It was a journey through fear, power, and understanding, and somehow she knew it would change her forever. As the day passed, they returned to the king's chambers. He had allowed her a brief moment to rest, yet her mind was restless, replaying the night's events, the shadows, and the spark she had felt. Her hands tingled with latent energy, her heart still racing from the encounter. He watched her quietly, and for a moment, the distance between them narrowed. "Do not underestimate yourself," he said. "You have power and you have courage. Together, they will see you through what is coming. But remember, the bond is only beginning. It will test you, it will challenge you, and it will choose you fully or not at all." She nodded, understanding the gravity of his words. The bond was not a promise. It was a challenge. And it had already begun. The sun began to set, painting the castle in amber and gold. Shadows stretched across the halls, long and deep. The Omega felt the pull of the night approaching again, a reminder that the trial was far from over. She glanced at the king, who had returned to his usual place by the hearth, his eyes reflecting the flames. The storm within him mirrored the storm within her, and she realized something both thrilling and terrifying. Survival would mean more than courage. It would mean trust, and trust, she knew, was far more dangerous than fear.